Hello and welcome back to Rad Mobile Development Kickstart. My name is Stephen Ball and this is part of the Developer Direct demo and discussion series from Embarcadero, focusing on mobile development using Delphi XE4 version. This is our second lesson, and today we're going to be turning up the style and data. So we're going to be learning about the style engine within FireMonkey, how to use it and put it into action. So this is lesson number 2 of a series of 6 tutorials. Last time through we kind of got our IDE up and running, and we introduced the PA server and managed to get our first demo applications running, and we also had a quick look at using some basics on visual live binding. Today we're going to be looking into the styles and how we can style our applications and how we can use a number of different controls. And we'll also be having a little bit more of a look at some of the data connectivity aspects within visual live bindings. So as always, if you are watching this live, then please do get involved with the chat on Twitter. Go to hashtag EMBTDD for Embarcadero Developer Direct, and do send us any questions through, and we'll be able to monitor those through, and also anybody else who's online will be able to answer back to you as well. If you've got any questions during the week, or if you see any resources that you'd like to find other similar resources or you can't locate them, then please do drop us an email on developerdirect.online@embarcadero.com, and we'll get back to you through or as soon as we can. So today's lesson, obviously turning up the style, let's have a quick look at what we're going to be covering. So we're going to have a quick introduction to Delphi's style engine in FireMonkey. We're going to have a look at some of the good practice guides, details that we've kind of extracted out the core bits for you, which around Apple's user guidelines and style guidelines. And the Apple police, so to speak. Sometimes people kind of complain about how strict they are in terms of getting apps sorted out and the style of things sorted. But the one thing that the Apple guidelines do bring is a very common usability guide that all Apple applications or applications on Apple devices kind of follow. So from a user point, it creates for great usability within your applications, and to have other people look at your applications and feedback through the development process before the app goes live to get that usability right from the experience they've got there can only be a good thing. So there is some very useful things to learn through the Apple guidelines, and some of this will be just straightforward and obvious. And as I say, if you ever want to figure out how best to do something, then just have a look at some of the Apple apps that are already on the phone as a start point. They are very useful for that. But also don't be too scared by the style guidelines, because even Apple break their own guidelines in the email client, because the default font they suggest you use doesn't actually support italics, and the email client obviously has to, so they have to use a different font. So obviously, the main thing is that the guidelines are there as a guide. They're not there as a hard and fast rule that has to be pinpoint correct, but they are there to help the usability. So we're going to be looking at some of the things to be aware of when building our user interfaces and taking that into account. We'll also have a look at some different techniques that we have for laying controls out on forms that can really help with running on multiple different devices when you have got screen size differences. Now obviously in the Apple world, then we're quite lucky because there's really only 4 screens, 3 really because of the resolution differences, that we need to consider, and that's kind of the iPads, and then there's the 2 iPhone and the iPhone 5. So we've got the different screen resolutions to worry about, but there's some great techniques that we have within the IDE for managing that and working with that. And we'll have a look at some of those options as we go through around anchors and layouts and so on. Okay, and we'll also be having a look at a few components as we go through today to broaden our kind of portfolio of controls that we're working with already. Now, before we go any further, it's definitely worth snapshotting this screen and getting hold of this this user interface design guide for use with FireMonkey that's been written by Serena DuPont, who's one of the product marketing managers based over in the US. And she did a webinar a while back where this this guideline document has kind of followed on from, and it's definitely worth getting hold of and looking through. There's a couple of screen prints below in terms of things from the document, and in fact, let's just pull it up and we can have a quick scan through it, just so we get an idea of what's actually there and available for us. So it's a 36-page document, and we can see it's got how to access some of the samples, and we'll be looking at the samples in more depth in the next tutorial as well. And also talks about the preferred components, looks at how to kind of lay those components out, designing for different form factors, looks at different samples that you can reference and go and link to. Some key component differences between desktop and mobile. So if you are migrating applications from the desktop across to mobile, or you're quite used to designing desktop applications, then there's some hints and tips in here. And then also finally some kind of do's and don'ts. So actually, whilst we've got this here, here we've got a toolbar at the top, and we can see we've got a label that's on here that's not got the correct style applied to that label. It should be a kind of a white label text in here, and we actually have a specific toolbar label style which you can apply to a label to actually get the correct style. So we'll have a look at that as we go through. So here we are. Here's what you do. Use the label, use the tool label style, align the text to the center. And there's useful references all the way through here. Again, using buttons, making sure that the button's in the correct location on the toolbar. So the back button should be in the top left corner. Shouldn't be a cancel. The back button shouldn't be just kind of hovering over here a little bit. It shouldn't be down at the bottom. The back button should be up in the top left corner. You can also have, referencing where you're going back to. So for example, if you look at the email client on iOS, it uses text to tell you which mailbox you're going back to the menu of from the inbox, rather than just having a back text. So you can use text in there to aid the usability, but that should be in the top left corner, and on these buttons should be on the toolbar as well. Around tab controls, then here we've got a tab that's got far too many tabs on it. For an iPhone, you should only have a maximum of 5 tabs. If you do have 5 tabs, the 5th one should normally be more if you need more options, and then you have a page that has all the extra listed tabs that you would like the user to be able to select, and when they select it, it will then become one of the tabs available along the bottom. I have seen Apple applications that have tabs along the top, but typically they shouldn't be there, and certainly you shouldn't have tabs at the top if you've got the label at the bottom. So here's an example of how you could have more for more tabs, and how the tabs should be aligned along the bottom typically. And again, some samples. We're going to be having a look at the controls sample in a moment through this session. Now, another thing on the toolbars is to make sure that we use the same type of control look. So we always have kind of either a border style or a non-border style. We don't mix them, and that's, that really just kind of looks a bit daft. So here's how we should kind of do that. And if we've got a prior and next, then we can use the segmented buttons or the specific tool buttons here to have the rounded corners for the prior and next. Also, you shouldn't really have a button on the top here that's not a toolbar button. There's a basic style that you can use for a blank button that you can write whatever you want into it, but the default button style shouldn't be used on the toolbar. And again, you shouldn't actually have switch controls on the toolbar as default, and you certainly shouldn't have checkboxes or labels and values kind of showing in the middle of the screen like this. They need to be grouped together, and the way we do that is like here we will use a list box with the group style, transparent list box style applied to the list box so it doesn't show completely white, and we align that to the top, and then you can parent the controls inside each list item to make it usable. With the toolbars, again, we shouldn't have two toolbars, one at the top and one at the bottom. If we do have a toolbar at the bottom, it needs to have a specific toolbar style. So you can see here there's the little bevel that's along the bottom, whereas here we haven't got that. That bottom style should make sure it's the bottom toolbar style. With multiple options, then you shouldn't really use radio options on an iOS screen. If they fitted well, then you potentially might be able to get away with it, but most of the time you're best off using kind of either a list box with items that you can select individually, and you can use the list box with the check mark accessory, or you can actually, here we've got 3 buttons and they're using a left segmented, a middle segmented and a right segmented style to give the look, and then you can have these working as a group, so you can actually make sure that when one's selected, the others will deselect themselves automatically, and that's what the group name property on the speed button's for. So you can do that already. Now also just simple things, making sure things are laid out correctly. You've not got buttons that are closer together than others. You've not got a stack of them sorted out. Make sure things are laid out and look correct. Obviously, if you had multiple on here, they could be closer together. As long as they've got that 44 pixel, which is the golden mark, available, then that's very, very useful. And the white paper also looks at some creating lists and using list boxes, and the list box really is designed up for small lists that aren't scrollable. You may kind of have a number of items in here, but they're not really designed up for massively long lists. You can use the group headers to be able to partake specific information around the section that you're using, and they're very useful to add into the list box, and you can use also a label with the embossed label style lookup against it to give this this header, so that's quite a useful tip to have. And again, there's a number of samples to have a look at there. Now finally, the list view is a very useful component. We had a quick look at it in lesson 1 where we populated some data in. Using the list view and the item from this is from the structure view, then you can actually go ahead and alter the details around how the items are going to be shown, and list views draw out a lot quicker than the list box does. So if you've got long scrollable lists, then definitely have a look at the list box, the list view rather than the list box. Okay, so I'm not going to delve too much into the rest of the contents of that webinar. I would suggest if you wanted to have some more time on it that you go in to have a look at it. We're gonna jump in though now to the IDE, and we're going to go build a couple of screens up, and we're going to look at some of the how we use the styles to link to the controls and change the look of the controls at design and runtime. So let's go File New and choose a FireMonkey mobile application here, and I'm going to choose let's take the header footer application this time. Now we can see we've already got the correct style applied to the toolbars for the header and footer, so this saves us some work. But here they've got the header. We can see the label in here. Now if we scroll down to the label, we'll be able to see it's got a tool label style applied to it. So the great thing here is we can actually drop down. We can see the multiple different types of styles that are available, and we can go and choose from these styles. So if I chose list box header, for example, we can see that it's changed the look. Now that's obviously not the right style to use there, nor would the embossed label style be. So I'm going to change it back to the tool label, and that's great because it picks up the correct font, it picks up the correct font size, and that allows us to have that label styled immediately without having to do anything else to it. And when we go to target out to other platforms in the future, then this style lookup, the name of this style, is going to come and apply that style to this control. Now we'll come back and we'll see how that works a little bit later, but let's go and add a few controls on here first. So let's go and add a button onto our toolbar at the top. Now we can see, and we already know, that the button style when on a toolbar should be of a toolbar button style. So again, I'm going to use the object inspector here just to scroll down to the style lookup. Now because it's a button, it's going to pick up the different button styles, and I can see here there's a whole host of different styles. So let's have a bookmark style. Let's try changing that now to an action button style. So we can see all it's doing is it's just changing the button as it needs to. And in fact, let's go and change this just to a normal tool button style. So down the bottom here we've got toolbar button, we've got toolbar button left, middle and right. So if we need to have a prior and a next, then we could have a left button and a right button together. Let's just change this to toolbar button. Let's go ahead and change the text property of this to hello. And there we can see we've now got our button styled up and looking as it should do. Now, let's say if we go ahead and change this to I think it's one of the toolbar buttons for back. Let's see where it is. Oh, I need to actually select the button, that might help. So the back tool button, we can see it's actually taking the correct shape. We just need to make sure that was set over on the left hand side now. Now one thing that you can do is if you want to make sure they stay in location, in fact let's add another button over here. The button onto another button onto here, And I'm going to go ahead and let's do the done style. So I have a style look up here, and we'll go and say that this is a done toolbar button. So that's pretty good. We've got our buttons there. We can see the different styles and all. But if we wanted to make sure they stay in the correct location, we can actually just here, let's rotate this round. We can see that as the screen rotates, it's not actually looking particularly good. We can use the anchors. So on the left button here, we've already got the anchor for the left and the top, and on the right one, by default, you get left and top as anchors for any control added. So I'm going to remove the left, and I'm going to add the right. So now if we rotate this round, we can see it's now maintaining its position according to the right hand side of the screen rather than the left hand side. So that's quite nice, being able to use the anchors. Now the anchors you can use for left, top, right and bottom. And in fact, if we go ahead and let's add a rectangle into the middle of the screen here, and let's just open this up a little bit so we can see a little bit more. In fact, I'm going to make this smaller at the bottom, and let's just align that to everything. We can see that that's maintaining a ratio as it works round. If we wanted to maintain the height, then we can just turn the anchor off to the bottom, and we can see as we rotate round, that's kind of going slightly bigger than we really want it to. So the other thing that we could do is we can always align something to the center, or actually we take these off. We can come and use all these alignment options we have here. So let's align this to the center, and we can see that's kind of pretty much staying within the bounds now. So we could make it just a little bit smaller if we wanted to, or again, if that's not really what we wanted, if we want it to be as big as we can make it, we could always say, well, let's align this to client. So that's always going to match the size. We can then use options around the margins. So we can say let's have a 5 pixel border always around it. And we can now see that that's maintaining that border. We could do a number of different things. Now, one of the additional aspects we could do here, we could actually add a scroll box into this region here. Let's just align that to client. And now using the structure, we could drag the rectangle into the scroll box, and let's just say put that to LL none, and let's keep it aligned to the right. Say we wanted to maintain this here. As we rotate round, we can see now that's disappeared inside the scroll region, and at runtime we'll be able to scroll that up and down to be able to access the rest of it. So there's a number of different things that we can do around alignment. In fact, whilst we're talking about aligning things, let's add a few rectangles on here, because there's some useful options that we get within FireMonkey for aligning things through. So let's go ahead and align this one to the top, and I'm going to make this, let's make this one blue just so we can identify it for the moment. This one here we can align to top, we'll have a grey one there, and this final one, let's make that red. So we've got our three different rectangles here. Now if we wanted to make sure one of them was at the very top, let's take the grey one here, we could say align this to most top. So we can see here that's actually going to go right to the top. Now the only thing we might want to do here is then just obviously make sure that our toolbar stays at the top. If we're ever worried about aligning things to most top and want to make sure things are confined within the area that we have, we can always use a layout. Now, layouts are very handy, and if we just go ahead and align this one to client, and we can go ahead and then just link our different controls into here, we can now see that we've got align most top to top and to top the different controls within our layout. Now, I often kind of use layouts, especially if I want to have something where I have, for example, something down the left-hand side, and I don't want it to encroach on other areas. So I could say, let's have another layout, add it with inside our current layout, and we can align that to the left. And then let's have another layout in here, align that one to client, and now each of these we can put into our layout, and we can see now we've got our left one all the way down the side and the other stuff in the middle on the right. So layouts are great for being able to group controls together and put a boundary in terms of the area that you're going to be aligning them out to. Now I'm going to actually change this now to align to bottom, because I actually want to show you another little trick that I use. Let's change this one to align client, just so we can see the area it's hitting. Now, something that you can do, obviously we have a toolbar at the bottom here at the moment, so it probably makes most sense, in fact, actually just to put this onto the footer, and to give it a style of a cancel button or a delete button here. Now we can right click on any control, and there's options to bring them to the front, send them to the back. There's also, under the position, you can align to the grid, you can size controls. I'm just going to align this here, and I want to center it in the window that it's within. So this is going to center it within that footer toolbar. And now if I go ahead here, I've got two options. I can either go ahead and say align this to the center, and it will automatically always keep it there. So let's go do that, and we can see here that's removed the anchors. Or the other thing is, if you want to always maintain something at the top or the bottom but in the middle, then you can go ahead and just put the alignment to none, and then just take these all off, and then just use the top or the bottom. I'm going to just align it to the bottom of this control here. So even if I made this control bigger, it's going to keep it at the bottom. And without the left or the right anchors, then it's just going to float in the location it's in. So if we had, for example, a control that we wanted to keep relative to the side there, then we can see that that space is actually getting bigger as we rotate it round, because it's not got the left or the right alignment on. So that's a very handy thing to be able to do. If you wanted to keep a group of buttons aligned in the middle, then again just put a layout in there, align it to the center, put the controls aligned in it, and just have it tight to the controls, and you've got your layout working. Okay. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about some of the other styles and how we use them. So that's kind of giving you a quick taster on how some of the layout stuff works as well. Tabs are a very useful tool within iOS development, and they give us a great way to be able to align out different screen views that we want to be able to use. And we can have custom tab icons. Now the tab icons, you can there's a property that you can go and load them in, and there's a custom tab icon selector which you can see on the screen there. We're going to have a look at that in a moment. But the same principles we've just seen with the buttons. You can select a tab, go to the style lookup, and it will give you a drop down of different styles that you can go ahead and use. and you can load in different resolution icons for use for 30 by 30 pixels, which is the standard resolution, or the 60 by 60, which is the high res version. And these are bitmap styles. And the nice thing about it is it'll take the grayscale image and will then be able to give you a preview of how it's going to apply the kind of glass type effect for iOS directly on for the non-selected and selected. So you don't need to worry about different icons for the different state. Just provide the one icon and it will manage that for you. Okay, and we'll also have a look at the keyboard type property, which is very useful around the different controls that we can use. Now, within the samples directory, there's the native iOS look and feel set up on the controls demo. Now, the controls demo basically just has all the controls set up with the different styles that you can use applied to them already. So you can go and have a quick look and say, oh, I need something that looks like that. You can either copy the controls, paste them into your application, or you can just go and explore the properties of those controls to locate the style that you need quickly, or whatever else it is. And just be aware that the styles will look slightly different when you run on iOS on a mobile compared to an iPad. The iPad actually has a slightly different colour style that goes with it, and the applications pick that up automatically for you when you compile out for and run on the iPad. So let's go and explore the tabs and see how they work. So let's go File New, and let's create a FireMonkey mobile application here. And I'm just going to start with a blank application, and we'll add all the components that we need in from scratch. So let's create a toolbar. Let's pop a label onto here, and let's just set that to align to client. And we're going to go set the style lookup here to be a tool label, and we just need to text align to be center, and we can call this my cool app. Now, just before we add the tab book in, we mentioned a while back that it picks up the font, the size, the font color automatically from the style. If you want to override those, then the styled settings options within the label, you can, or in fact in most controls, you can come in here and you can disable those options, and that will allow you to then come and change the fonts, change the size, the font color and so on, and actually override to a different size, different font color, different font family if you so wish. But that's quite nice that you can control which bits it will override for your application. So let's go ahead and add a tab control in. Now I'm going to set this off. First of all, I want to align this to client, and let's just right click on the tab control and add a couple of tab items. So first off, we don't really want the tabs to be at the top, we want those down the bottom. So if we come down to the tab position property, we can change through the different locations. So we could say let's have the tabs at the bottom. We could say let's make the tabs dots. So we then see these little dots that we can represent the different tabs. We could say let's have no tabs and no dots visible. So at design time we're going to see these little dots, but at runtime they won't be visible. So let's just change these to bottom. I'm going to select tab item 1 here. Let's go ahead and change the style lookup here, and we can see straight away we've got the different tab item styles appearing. Like I said, let's change this to tab item contact, which then is going to show us kind of the image here. We can go ahead and change the text. Put enter my name, or it probably should be my details or something a little bit more descriptive. Let's go and add an edit control in here. And again, even the edit controls have styles. So we can create a search list box. So if we wanted to have a search that we had at the top of the screen, so align this to the top. If we wanted to have, let's have another control, an edit control maybe, and actually, let's just use the one that we've got. Let's just add a button on here and set this to. Let's just set this to align center, and we can say update details, and here we're going to set our label2.text to be the edit control that we have, text property. And in fact, let's just put in here hello. There we are. It's a very high intensity business application here, but here we go. Let's just put in Bob as a name and update our details, and hello Bob. So there we are. Let's just prove that wasn't a fluke, and let's put hello Stephen and update our details, and there we are. It's come through again. So this is great, nice and easy. What we can do though, we can do this with no lines of code. We can actually take this button click out. Let's remove the button, no need for that. And if we right click and bind visually, let's just pop back to our default layout. And we're going to take edit 1 and label 2. Let's just draw a line between those two, so that's sorted through. Let's clear the text property and select the binding. We're able to use this custom format property, and there's a number of different custom format properties that we can use on multiple controls, but they all have the same point, is being allowed to edit the data as it goes through. So here I'm going to actually just put into quotes hello, a space, plus %s, which is going to put the string through for us. And let's just go ahead, save that. In fact, I'm just going to remove the text from the label because that's where it keeps picking it up from. So we don't have to worry about that again. And let's go ahead and just reset and run our application. So let's put in here Matthew, and we can see that's now working through. Let's change this to be James, and again we can now see that's working through. So obviously it doesn't need to be on a separate tab, it could be on the same screen. It will validate at the point that you leave the control. So in fact, let's just to prove that, let's just go and select our label, bring it back onto the first tab for the moment, and we can see it's just there. Now, let's say when we go and change the value here, let's put in Simon, and as we hit enter, it's going to validate and come through. But if we come in here, let's change this to William. You know, that's not going to do anything until the point that we actually are done and close the control. So we've had a quick look. Let's have a look at actually using the keyboard now to define the data entry input that we're doing. So this keyboard at the moment is the default keyboard, but the keyboard type allows us to have multiple different types of keyboards. So say this was an email address that we were typing in. In fact, let's add a few edit controls onto here just so we can see how the different keyboard types work. And you'll have to excuse me for being flagrantly in breach of guidelines here for the moment, but I just want to demo how these keyboards work. So I've set one here to be an alphabet. Let's change one here to be an email address. Let's make this one here a phone, a number pad, and this final one here, let's make this a URL. So let's go ahead now and run. Now this isn't going to put any confines against the specific edit controls because they're not actually linked up to any specific data type at the moment. But what it will do is, as I'm in here, we can see we've got one type of keyboard. If I select another one, we can see here that the keyboard's actually changed to be one that's specifically designed for entering email addresses. If we select the number pad one and even the URL one, we can see we get the .com bit arrive. So these are very much there to be able to customize what we're working on and bring better usability to our applications. So it's very easy to use the input controls that we have with the specific keyboard types to control how those controls work at runtime. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's bring some data into this app and make a search going on as well. So I'm going to go ahead here and add a client data set to our application. Now a client data set is an in-memory data set and allows us to apply a number of actions against some data. And I've got a file here which I'm going to go and get from the samples directory. So if you have a look on your computer, you'll be able to find in your user public documents Rad Studio 11 samples data folder. You'll be able to find a number of XML files with data in there. So I'm just going to add in, let's take the employee data here. And if we go ahead and have a look at the field editor now, we can add all fields in here. We can see the number of fields that we've got specifically in here. Or we could just go ahead and bind visually and we'd be able to see, because it's an active data set at this point, we'll be able to see the data there. So I want to be able to show that data. So the best view here to control to use here is a list view. So let's just add that, plonk it on, and set align to client. And I want to show, let's just take the first name and put that to the item text. Now I want to keep this in sync, so I'm just going to draw a sync here across, and that's going to remove the current binding and just add it back in with one that instead of just filling the list, it's actually going to create a bindable two-way list. So when you select one, it's going to come back here and then select the appropriate record. So next we need to actually be able to filter using the edit control here. So I've come in quickly and just to create an on-change event just for speed and simplicity here. And we're going to pop in here two commands. The first is to set the data set to be filtered. We want it to actually have the ability to pick up that it's being filtered. And in fact, what we probably should do is let's just say, let's set filtered equals the edit one text is greater than nothing, because then we've got something to filter by. And then we're going to build up a filter. So the last name is going to be where we have actually we're going to have first name here, but the first name is like then the text edit, and we're going to add in the wildcards, the percentages here within that as well. So let's just save, say yes here and run. And I've just switched to run this on Windows as a target. Let's add in an I, and we can see this is going to bring everybody who's got an I in their name back. And let's see if we can find an IL, so we can now filter through. So that's great, that's pretty cool, but what we want to do now is just run this out onto our iOS device. I'm going to come up here to the project, and to the deployment options. Because we've added on the client data set, this uses the Midas libraries. So under the deployment here, I'm just going to add a feature which is the Midas library, and that's here. We can blow down, we can see exactly what this is going to be deploying across or including into the build as we go through. So okay, now that will statically link in the Midas library to our application for running out onto the iOS devices. So let's go ahead and rebuild the application. And that's now linking, and we'll deploy across. It helps if I run out to the simulator rather than my device, I guess. So let's try again. Let's try and run that to my simulator. And here we are. We can now, let's type in IL as we did before. We can see the list filtering down. Now before we do run that out to the device, let's just go ahead and on our second tab here, let's put a few bits of detail down here. So let's just put a couple of edit controls. In fact, a nice thing to do here is use the live bindings to do it for us. Let's go ahead and link to a new control, a T-edit control. Let's add another link to a T-edit control here. You can see it's keeping our preference. Let's just add those down. And let's add our phone number. Now I'm just going to check here. We need to select now our controls and just drag them onto our second tab. We can go ahead now and lay these out. Now let's just go ahead and change the width property. So set those to 200, and then let's just change the size of these labels here to 200 as well. So this is all good. Now, using what we've already learnt about the alignments, we can go ahead and let's keep these to the top, and let's go ahead and make these just a little bit wider again. Let's try 300, maybe a little bit less, 280. We can go ahead and change the position. Let's align those. So we're not going to want to change the top position. We're just going to center into the window. That's pretty cool. Again, the other thing that we probably want to do is just space these equally, which they look like they are already, which is good. And now just go ahead and use the anchors. We can keep those aligned to the right. Okay, now this is looking good. So let's go ahead and save that. And I have actually got my device running here, so let's see if we can actually now just go ahead and run this out to the device. So just as that deploys over, let's go and open up Reflector and get ready to view this on my device. So here we are, we now have our application running. We can select Terry. Let's go and have a look. We can see Terry's details. We can now click in here and let's just filter this through and maybe have a look at Willie, and we can see Willie's details. So that's all pretty good. We've got our very simple application running, we've got our list view working. We could go ahead, if we had images, display the thumbnail images into here as well. There's a number of bits we could do. Obviously this data set doesn't actually have those, so let's jump back here. Or at least I don't think it has an image. No, it hasn't, unfortunately. So we could, now we can, in fact, yeah, let's go and we'll use the prototype bind source, just because this data set didn't have any images in it. I just want to show you how you can get the thumbnails onto the side if you do have an image, but we'll use the prototype bind source for that. So let's just go ahead and clear this out of the way, and let's just go to remove that data set. We've got rid of our bindings. Okay, so let's just go ahead and add a prototype bind source. Let's pop some fields on here, and I'm going to make sure I get some that have got images on them. Bind visually. Now the item text here we'll put to the contact name, and let's just remove that. There we go. The contact name, and we want to get the image in. So what we can do is on the actual list view itself, we've got the item appearance here, so we can actually just come in here and let's say we want to have an image list item, and by doing that we should now be able to just turn the edit mode on and off. Oh well, here we are. Item bitmaps arrived. So let's just go ahead and hook this up to the bitmap. And there we are, we can see the person's individual bitmaps. So on here we could actually, let's just go bind visually, let's go find an image control that we've put down onto the form, and hook that up there. And we'll want to keep this in sync. And then let's just hook up the name. That's because we had some reminiscent links that were left over. So contact title we'll just pop into the first name here. We're probably going to get a warning about the last one that's been removed. So that's fine. Let's go ahead and run. My client dataset's gone. Oh, let's just get rid of our filter for now. I'm just going to unlock my device so we can actually see this running on there.
Oh, you've got the key, yeah. Okay.
So here we are, here's our iPad running, and we can see we've got somebody selected here. And if we go back to our list, let's go choose Mary. Come back, we can see Mary's details all selected. Adam, we can see Adam's details and everything as well. So we can see here we've kind of gone back to front a little bit, but using the prototype bind source, even at design time, you can get things going, and then you can just go and fetch the data set, swap the bits over very easily, and get the data showing up onto the screens afterwards. So I hope that's been kind of a useful and interesting introduction through to those. let's just finish off. Jump back to our slides. So that's been us kind of exploring the style engine and getting some data in, using some of those styles to help us prototype up that data very quickly. So please go ahead and have a play with that. Have a look at the streaming site where we're getting some resources up there for you to explore through. If I've not managed to kind of get that part there in time for you watching it now, then please also have a look at the Twitter feed. We'll have all the links up on the Twitter feed. So again, the Twitter feed here is #EMBTDD. So for the next lesson, we've mentioned the samples directory a little bit today already. Do go ahead, it will be on your local machine in the preloaded folder here, and user public documents, Rad Studio 11 samples. Go and have a play with some of the samples, have a look in there. There's some extra stuff around layout, around having scrollable forms and so on that we just wouldn't have enough time to get through in this Kickstart session, but they're there for you to go and have a look at those samples. So do go and have a play, and we'll be delving into some of those samples in the next session. So if you've got any questions over any of them specifically, then please do email us through, and we should then be able to address some of those questions as we go through lesson number 3.